Choosing to venture westward by land meant a shorter trip if you left at the proper time of year, but it did not mean an easier one. One advantage that those who traveled to California by land held over those choosing to sail by ship was that they were able to take many of the supplies and provisions they needed with them, because many, if not all, traveled by covered wagon. Often, these people would travel in groups to provide a sense of security against the unknown elements ahead and help ensure a safer overall journey from the Native Americans, which many knew little of and blindly feared. The jumping-off point for the trails were much the same as the fur trappers who came before them. Independence, Missouri, St. Joseph, Missouri, or Council Bluffs, Iowa. Many traveled along the Oregon Trail until splitting off towards their individual destinations. The story of the Donner Reed Party was still fresh in the minds of Americans, and it was by now well known that if you were going to travel west, you were well advised to choose the proper time of year. After the early spring rains, the grass would grow to sufficient length so the oxen and other livestock taken could sustain themselves upon it. If you left too late, you ran the very real risk of having snow fall in the mountain passes by the time your party reached them. The Donners had made a mistake that no one wanted to make again. The trip was long and exhausting. Many chose to walk alongside their wagons because the rough trail made the wagon seats too uncomfortable. But an uncomfortable wagon seat was the least of the future prospectors' problems. Many fell ill with dysentery from drinking bad water, and cholera took the lives of many along the way. All the preparations and knowledge of those who took the paths before them could not keep these simple infections and disorders from ravaging the ranks of travelers. Those crossing the Great Plains would have to make do with the materials that nature provided. Wood for a fire was a scarce commodity along the trail, but it was discovered that oxen patties made a clean and odorless fuel. It was an inevitability that some traveling to California for the gold rush would fall on hard times along the way, and for a multitude of reasons. Most who made it to California made it carrying a much lighter load than the one they departed with, whether it was a wagon that was broken beyond repair, dead livestock, or simply having to leave gear that was unneeded and only weighing them down on the trail. These Americans had to purge some of their gear, only to have to repurchase it from now flourishing merchants once they made it to the gold fields. Thousands crossed the nation and risked their lives, and they would continue to take risks once on California soil. If an American from the East Coast chose to make their way to California by sea, then they had two main options before them. The first option was to travel all the way down to the tip of South America and maneuver around the treacherous Cape Horn. This was the cheaper and longer of the two options. This route often took upwards of 6 months to complete the over 13,000-mile journey. The obsession to hasten towards the gold fields as quickly as possible brought about a shorter second option. This route would mean to take a boat down to Panama and then cross the 70-mile isthmus of jungle on foot, where, if the passengers were lucky, another ship would not be far off to take them the rest of the way to San Francisco. Neither option offered the traveler much comfort or safety. Many of these ships were converted old cargo vessels whose owners hastily made crude repairs and modifications. The owners sometimes installed holes in the deck to better ventilate the spaces below, and where the cargo once was stored, they created cramped bunks to fit as many people into the ship as they could. As if the inherent natural danger of such a trip, or the sheer boredom induced from months at sea were not enough to test the mettle of these travelers, They often found themselves sailing with spoiled provisions, such as salted meats, rancid lard, and pests that got into anything they could. The list of diseases that plagued the passengers was long and included scurvy, which was brought on by the lack of a balanced diet, and more deadly, cholera, that claimed many souls who traveled both the land path as well as the water routes. For those who made it to the port in San Francisco, many expected to find gold right where they landed. Their knowledge of California's geography was almost non-existent, and the news about the discovery of gold did not provide many small details. Instead of finding gold where they landed, these men quickly learned that it was another 150 miles inland to reach the goldfields. Many were already exhausted and in less than ideal health after the trip. They would learn a valuable lesson. They had come so far, only to have to go farther. These men trudged on towards their most desirous goal. The seemingly endless journey by sea was only the first of many hurdles these adventurers would face. Hundreds of ships from all over the world landed in San Francisco throughout the course of the gold rush. Time and time again, ships would be utterly abandoned by both passenger and crew as they feverishly headed inland towards the promise of gold. These ships would sit in the harbor nearly forgotten. Sometimes they were used as store ships or hotels. They were also often purposefully sunk. The two abandoned ships that General Mason saw in July of 1848 and reported on in his letter to the U.S. government was only the beginning of a trend that the harbor would endure for years to come. San Francisco became a boomtown nearly overnight. From 1848 through 1850, the city would see its population rise from 1,000 to over 20,000. The influx of new citizens was so great that the surrounding area could not supply enough timber to build the city fast enough. This is where the many forgotten ships found new life. They would be repurposed and turned into shops, hotels, homes, and other structures. Pieces of the ships were used as landfill, and the ever-expanding city was built right on top of them.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to help us produce more compelling historical content like this, please like, comment below, and share this video with fellow history buffs. And of course, be sure to subscribe to help keep history happening.